Okay, so I want to go into a story, story of the Emperor's New Clothes, and this is a story first published in the 1830s, so that makes it what, almost 200 years old. It's one of the great metaphors of our time, maybe of all time, because it's a really, really sharp and incisive indictment of a specific kind of immorality. And to my eye, this is an illustration and description of the depth and heart and root of all immoral behavior. So we'll go into it a little bit. I wanted to read a little bit from what I asked ChatGPT to give me the earliest English translation, and I just want to read the first paragraph. Many years ago, there was an emperor who was so excessively fond of new clothes that he spent all of his money in dress. He did not trouble himself in the least about his soldiers, nor did he care to go either to the theater nor to the chase, except for the opportunities then afforded him for displaying his new clothes. He had a different suit for each hour of the day, and as many as of any other king or emperor one is accustomed to say he is sitting in council, it was always said of him, the emperor is sitting in his wardrobe. Now I did look into I asked ChatGPT to find some critical analysis of this work, and there was some critical analysis that gave the interpretation that clothing in the story is a kind of fabrication of the things that we wear to kind of mitigate ourselves from others. Stories we tell ourselves, props that we devise, roles that we play, inventions and fabrications that are technologies which stand in the way of direct contact with reality. So clothing is a technology simply. And I believe the story is a really, really crucial and critical and incisive indictment, again, of fabrication, generally. So we know the story, and I want to, again, refer to the specific text, just the beginning part. One day, two rogues, calling themselves weavers, made their appearance. They gave out that they knew how to weave stuffs of the most beautiful colors and elaborate patterns. The clothes manufactured from which should have the wonderful property of remaining invisible to everyone who was unfit for the office he held or who was extraordinarily simple in character. That's going to mean something when we get into our own particular analysis. These must, he said, be splendid clothes, thought the emperor. Had I such a suit, I might at once find out what men in my realms are unfit for their office and also be able to distinguish the wise from the foolish. This stuff must be woven for me immediately. Now, again, we're going to really hold on to that metaphor that this story is about fabrication and about invention. And we're going to be pointing to Trump, inevitably, invariably, but also to generally narcissistic conditions that all of us, to some extent, have, some more than others. So he says, I must find out what men in my realms are unfit for their office and to be able to distinguish the wise from the foolish. So he uses the device, the invention, the fabrication of this fabric to flush out and ferret out mischievous fools, people who are unfit for their office, people who don't belong, right? So he's gonna cleverly devise a strategy to root out those who are maybe disloyal to him. So that goes on and on and on. So the first person that he says, I should like to know how the weavers are getting on with my cloths, said the emperor to himself after some little time had elapsed. He was, however, rather embarrassed when he remembered that a simpleton or one unfit for his office would be unable to see the manufacturer. To be sure, again, that's a precise word that's direct from the translation in the 1830s. To be sure, he thought, he had nothing to risk in his own person, but yet he would prefer sending someone else to bring him intelligence about the weavers and their work before he troubled himself in the affair. So he's going to third party another person to do the the difficult job for him. He's going to task it out to somebody else to find out, because he doesn't want to be embarrassed himself, because he might be able to see, he might not be able to see. He's not sure if he is in fact unfit for his job. He's not sure if he is in fact a simpleton. But in fact, he is a clever man. And cleverness is going to be the thing that everybody who is implicated in this indictment, cleverness is the thing that they, of course, possess, because they are not simpletons. All right, and so they're fit for their office because they're clever. So one after another, as we know the story, they're embarrassed to see that they can't see the cloth, and knowing that people who can't see the cloth are unfit or simpletons, they decide that they're not unfit for their jobs and they are not simpletons. So they're clever people. So they cleverly arrange and manufacture the fabrication that, oh, what a delightful robe. What delightful embroidery. How magnificent this gold thread is that you're weaving into those into the loom. Right. So one after another, the ministers and the counselors pretend, fake, fabricate their testimony, and they report to the king, in fact, that the weavers down there and they were getting more gold thread, more silk, in their own knapsacks. They report to the king that, in fact, it's marvelous stuff, right? So when it's the king's turn, he's not a simpleton. He's not unfit for his job, so he's going to fabricate as well. And that's how the story goes, right? So, and then at the end of the story, we have the child who the king is parading through town wearing nothing but apparently his skivvies or whatever. Child cries out that the king's wearing nothing. And all the townspeople, of course, by that point, had indicted themselves into this mass hysterical lie, this fabrication. Everybody believes that everybody can pretend, everybody pretends that other people believe, and so they pretend to believe as well. And that, again, I'm going to call out as the deep, horrific root of all morality. This kind of psychological trap and psychological process is one in which each indicted person has a deep need for approval, a deep need to be seen as, by others, not simple, clever, smart, intelligent. Well, they confuse fitness for their job with cleverness. Right? They're clever, and so they're going to escape out of the trap by putting themselves into the trap that only innocence can reveal. So this is a story about innocence and cleverness. And so innocence, we see, is incapable of fabrication. That's the nature of innocence. The nature of innocence is not fucking around, fabricating, lying, pretending, avoiding, escaping, pretending, trying to win the approval of others. So innocence has no concern whatsoever for approval. Innocence has no concern for what other people think, what other people regard as fitness for an office, fitness for a role. Innocence has no role. Innocence is to be without a role. Innocence is to be unfabricated, uncomposed, uncontingent, standing alone, standing in being, not trying to do, trying to become, trying to appear as, simply being. Lots of people can't handle that. They want to be somebody. They want to become something. They want something. They want to leverage other people. They want a third party, some means of getting ahead of other people so that they can elevate themselves into the kingdom, into the castle, into the realm where you change your clothes every other hour, change your story every other hour. You change your, because there's no settling into being a king. King is something you got to do all the time. King is something you have to leverage all the time. So anybody who has the ambition to become a king is going to end up fabricating, lying, twisting. Now, how this becomes a really pointed illustration of the depth of depravity and immorality is that you've got to imagine the real world consequences of what would happen when all the townspeople, all of them, bigger than the kid, don't like what the kid has to say. So they can either fess up, they can fess up in toto, all of them at once, or somebody's going to be left holding the bag, and that's not going to be the person that's going to be happy, right? Because everybody else is going to fess up and say, hey, the kid is right. But then some people are going to be holdouts, and then there's going to be some kind of a war, some kind of an embattlement. The kid is the most vulnerable person in that story at that point. The kid, in order to, or rather the townspeople and the ministry, the kingdom and the administration, they have to keep the lie going. They're deeply invested in the lie, because that's how they get their bread and butter, right? That's the fitness for their job, right? So violence springs from there. Violence springs from the self-defensive mechanism of having to protect a lie, having to protect your own sense of fitness, your own sense of being up to your role, being appropriate, being right, being good, being right, smart, all that stuff, cleverness. They invest in their own cleverness. So they're not about to lapse downward into innocence. And so all violence comes from there. Violence cannot come out of innocence. Violence doesn't come out of being, it comes out of wanting something and wanting to leverage somebody else to get it. So here we are, again, the Epstein matter and the cabal of Trump's fabrications and the lies that have to be interperpetuated in order for that administration to keep floating. So here it is, underexposure. And I just wanted to give a shout out to that story as one of the really great stories of our time, one of the great metaphors, I've always appreciated that metaphor since as long as I can remember it. So thanks for tuning in. This is a short video. I don't want to keep going on and on, but I think I made my point. Thanks for sharing. Bye-bye.